Hi, I'm Laurie Williams, and decorating with gourds and pumpkins is very fun. It's easy, and it will result in beautiful centerpieces for your home and for your tables. And since Dorothy showed you her really beautiful gourd displays, I'm going to start my portion with gourds that could be decorated using succulents. So here's one gourd. I cut off the top. I used a wood burner to simply burn in a design. And this makes a great planter. However, one thing about gourds is that if it gets moist inside, it will rot. So if it's used as a planter, you can drill a hole in the bottom. And one way to help ensure that it won't rot is you can have a planted container of succulents in plastic or glass. And the easiest is just to plop it right into your planter and enjoy it. And then if you need to change it later on, just take out your container. And that's one easy way. But you can also plant your container with soil. It's going to be important, though, that you coat the inside of the gourd. And there are products such as Plasti-Dip that comes in a spray or in a brush, and you can just coat the inside and protect it from moisture. If you're going to be using this gourd outside where it's a little moist, you can also protect the outside with a clear acrylic. And then all you need to do is to fill it with a cactus mix. And succulents need really good draining soil. So my easy mix is to use half soil and then to use half a mix of perlite and coconut coir. So let me show you. This is one gourd that I cut out using the jigsaw, and I coated the inside with Plasti-Dip, used my cactus mix, and then planted succulents inside. Here's another gourd. I just used a wood burner to make the decorations. And then to stain it, there are all sorts of products on the market. This is just a simple transparent acrylic. And all I used were little Q-tips to paint it, or even just tissue. So it was really easy to stain this. Here's another example. This one I just stained the gourd. And then I went to town planting it with succulents. The thing about gourds, especially after listening to Deanne and Dorothy, it takes a long time to grow gourds, to prepare them, to dry them. And so I really have a special appreciation for any of the planters and any of the gourds that have been painted and prepared because of the amount of time and work that's gone into them. And now, onto pumpkins. It's really easy to decorate pumpkins with succulents. And one easy way is to choose any kind of pumpkin, doesn't matter the color. And then you can fill it with a container of succulents. So this is the size of my container. I simply trace. Then I use a little knife, cut around, and I'm able to clean it all out using my spoons and scoopers and save the seeds for planting. And then I take my succulent container, place it inside, and voila, you have an easy succulent display. One thing, however, is that once you cut into the pumpkin or even puncture the skin, it's going to start to rot and decompose. So unfortunately, this planter will only last about 3 days, a few days. And that's a lot of work for so little enjoyment. So I will show you some ways that you can prepare succulent planters without cutting into the actual pumpkin. The first is using soil. So I have here a pumpkin that's flat on top, or it's really good if you can get one that's really concave. And I'm going to put soil right on top. You can cut off the stem, you can leave the stem, it doesn't matter. The size can be small or large. And then I take my mix of soil, perlite, and coconut coir, and I moisten it a little bit, and hopefully I won't make too much of a mess. You just pack the soil somewhat thick right onto the pumpkin, and it works best if the soil is moistened. Okay, there we go. Now for the succulents. The reason why I love using succulents is if I cut some roses or daisies and I plop them in here in a few hours, they would be wilted and we would have a really sad display. But succulents have a lot of water in them already. They can last for weeks and months with very little water. So when using succulents, I want to just take one quick minute to talk about the world of succulents, because succulents is a big umbrella, and all it means are plants that are juicy. So this little cactus is a succulent, but so are the giant saguaros. This aloe is a succulent. Here's a haworthia, also in the succulent family. You have some big aeoniums. Here's some graptopetalum. And these ones are mainly indoor plants in the Northwest. I take them out in the summer, but otherwise they like the dry, warmer climate. But in the garden, there are lots of succulents that love the cold weather. It doesn't mind the rain. It doesn't mind freezing temperatures. So we have a lot of sedum of different varieties. And the sempervivum. And these ones will do wonderfully outdoor all year. So, to get started, the great thing about succulents is that I can just cut the stem and plop it into the soil. But if you take a look at this one here, you'll see it's long and leggy because it didn't get a lot of light. And notice how the leaves come off very easily. This is what I love about succulents, is I can carefully remove these leaves. I can place them on soil or just a piece of plastic. And in a few weeks, it will start to grow some roots. So here's one. There's the leaf. And this is over a few months. You'll see the roots right here. And it will also start to make another succulent flower. And this is a really, really easy way to get lots of succulents without having to purchase them. Here's another one with a big leaf. After a few weeks, it started growing roots, and after a few months, new succulents. So if I wanted to, I could plant the ones with roots inside, but it gets a little bit messy. And so all I do is to take a scissor or my pruning shears, and I just cut the stem. The succulent has all the water it needs in the leaves and the nutrients. So I'm going to remove some of these bottom ones, and I want to leave about an inch on here or more. And then when it comes time to planting your planter, it's up to you how you want to design it. So some will take their largest succulent and they'll place it either in the center or just off center. And I'll just poke a hole with a pencil or a chopstick. And you'll see that that one is too large. So then it becomes really easy. I can just cut the stem. Now, one thing about succulents, we want to let this stem callus or harden over so it doesn't suck up water into the leaves. Water is a succulent's biggest enemy. So I want to let this callus over for a couple of days, or if I put it in the soil, I'm not going to water it for at least a week or two. So I plop it in, and it's going to be a little bit wobbly because it'll take a couple of weeks for roots to start forming. And then it's up to you how you want to arrange it. Many will start with the largest ones in the middle and then start putting smaller ones on the outside. If you have your sedum, I don't know if you can see, there are root hairs growing all along the sedum. So I like to also just place these first, because eventually they'll root into the planter. Here's some other with roots. If you have other interesting trailers, you can just set those right on the soil, and eventually it'll root right into the soil. And then you can use your other succulents just to hold it down. If you want, you can put some moss around the outside to hold it, but the design is totally up to you. You could have all small ones, large, small ones, have a different color palette, all the same palette, any design you want, they'll turn out beautiful. So let me show you one that I planted a couple months ago. So this one, I used soil. I put an aeonium right in the middle, and I filled other succulents around the outside. And then I also put some moss along the outside just to hold the soil in. And this one, it doesn't wiggle at all because the roots have started to form. And this one I started in mid-September, so it's almost 2 months old. So that's an easy way using soil. But you can also make wonderful planters without using soil. So here's a little mini pumpkin. Some people like to remove the stem. I like to do a variety. The stem is pretty interesting. And I'm going to use moss. This is wonderful forest moss, but you can also use sphagnum moss. You can buy craft moss, forest moss in a store. And you're just going to use the moss instead of the soil. And this is what the succulents are going to start rooting in. And you will also be able to mist these, and eventually they will root. To keep the moss in place, there are all sorts of spray adhesives on the market. And I'm not going to spray in here, but you just put a little layer of the spray down, place the moss on the top, and it can be quite thick. You don't have to worry about cutting it into a nice little bowl shape. It's a little more interesting if it looks a little bit wild. So my moss is now on the pumpkin. And then I can take whatever sizes and shape, and I can glue them either with a white glue, and I'll just put some glue on the stem, stick them in. Here's another one. I could put white glue on the stem to hold it down. I can put my other trailing succulents in because they've got root hairs everywhere. Other people will use a hot glue gun, and this works wonderfully. When I first heard of using glue guns on succulents, I was just cringing and thinking, oh gosh, that's going to hurt. How can I burn my succulents? But these are water, lots of water. So I can use the hot glue all on the stem, the bottom of the stem. Eventually, they'll root right through the hot glue gun. And these are wonderful. So you can just keep arranging however suits your fancy. So here is a sample without a stem. And this one was done over a month ago. And so it's really pretty sturdy. One of these I used only white glue, and one of them I used a hot glue gun. So they both work really, really well. Now, the one thing is not to let the bottom sit in water. So it's really easy if you want to just trace and cut out of cardboard a little coaster to place your succulent on. That will absorb any water. Now, succulents do like bright indirect light. So I do like to place these near a window, but my pumpkins, mini pumpkins, I've had in places that aren't that sunny, and they've lasted over a month doing just fine. It takes a while for the roots to grow, so I didn't worry about misting them or watering them for the first couple of weeks at least, but it depends on your climate. After that, I tried just squirting a little bit of water. I tried misting the moss, and either way, it works fine. So depending on the size, you may use up to a cup of water, but you can also just try misting it. I've hardly watered these at all, and a month and a half later, they're still going strong. Let me just show you a couple examples. Here's another one that I planted. This was about almost 2 months ago, and it's still doing really well. The succulents are starting to grow. There's no wobble, so they're probably starting to take root. And then here's another one. This one I planted in a light green pumpkin. And the thing I like about this is it will do fine during the Thanksgiving season, and then during the December holidays. I can just add little decorative touches to it. So it can go from one holiday to the next really easily. And then the great thing about these succulent planters is that when the pumpkins start to decompose, or when you don't really need them as your centerpieces anymore, you can just remove the moss, remove the succulents, and put them in other containers and pots, and you'll have your whimsical, beautiful planters to continue your succulent growth. And then the pumpkins, you can carve out the seeds. You can save some of the pumpkin to eat. And then my compost bins are just waiting to welcome these pumpkins. So nothing will go to waste. And these planters will be able to add a lot of joy to the house and bring nature indoors and then they will contribute to nature when they're all done. So that's my presentation. And I want to thank Deanne and Dorothy and for their parts of the presentation. And I hope that you grow pumpkins and gourds and play with them and make them part of your annual holiday table decor.